Okay, this next video is just going to cover these next three slides because they're not quite so in depth. So we're talking here about oceanic pollution, and particularly with plastic waste. Now, this is something which is becoming more and more of a problem. If you go to the beaches in Hong Kong, particularly out to Sai Kung, like we go out to Sai Wan and Tai Long Wan, unfortunately, we often see, depending which way the currents are flowing, you'll often see like a lot of plastic waste just like lying around in some of the in some of the sort of little bay areas and stuff, and that's horrible to see. It's just like polystyrene waste. And what's sad is that stuff will never biodegrade. It will just sit there. Well, in hundreds of years it will, but like it will essentially just be floating around in the ocean, which is awful. And the knock-on effects of that are that will get ingested by animals, or it will ensnare and entrap animals, and like seabirds particularly will get caught up in like plastic packaging or wrapping, which will then like end up constrain their wings and they can't fly. Turtles, I mean, these sometimes I see horrible pictures of turtles with plastic straws actually stuck in their noses or like in their mouths or something. And it's nasty stuff. And it's a huge issue. Like this video here is really interesting because it talks about like what some people are doing to actually try and like collect up some of this plastic, like literally instead of fishing, using massive nets, just trying to sweep up this plastic from the ocean. And it just comes from irresponsible disposal. Like some people just literally just don't think, and they might be on the beach and just like, yeah, we're done with our barbecue, just going to leave all the stuff here. And of course, when the tide comes in, whatever, when there's a storm, that all that would just get washed out to sea. So it's really bad. Let's move on. Atmospheric pollution. So this is obviously when we're burning fossil fuels, or if you're driving a car a lot, carbon monoxide is released into the atmosphere, and that's greenhouse gas. And when power stations burn coal, that releases huge amounts of carbon dioxide. And when factories operate, they are doing the same thing. So we are releasing massive amounts, like tons and tons of greenhouse gases every day into the atmosphere, and it's gradually causing like global warming, which is terrible. So now more than ever, like more than I've ever known, luckily, the world is sort of like starting to shift its dynamic to thinking we actually have to do something about this, because this is a ticking time bomb. Like we are going to literally be shooting ourselves in the foot if we don't target this. So it's a huge issue. So it's down to companies and countries to think about sustainable or clean fuel sources. So things like solar power, wind power, and geothermal power. Like countries like Iceland are amazing because I think they produce. I mean, it's not because of them. It's lucky for them because of their geological makeup. But there is so much volcanic activity on Iceland that all of their energy is produced through geothermal power. So essentially, the country is net zero in terms of its carbon emissions. In fact, they make so much energy that they can't use it all. So they actually export a lot of energy to other countries. So that obviously brings them a bit of revenue in, which is great for them. So that's really nice to hear. And a lot of countries are now pledging to move to like 60 or 70% renewable and sustainable energy by whatever date. And there's certain conventions like the Paris Accord or the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Convention and stuff. And these are countries committing to reducing their emissions by a certain level, by a certain date. And this is always causes contention because it takes like countries like the US, when Donald Trump was president, to withdraw from the Paris Agreement and to be like, we're not doing that anymore. And obviously the message that sends the rest of the world is really, really negative. So it takes global superpowers like China, like the US, to actually really lead by example with things like this. They need to be really slashing their emissions and showing other countries how it can be done, because they're so influential on the world stage. So okay, then the last one is how polymers can be produced with lower environmental and social impact. So one thing that companies can do with plastics is going back to the 6Rs, is rethinking the packaging that's used. So that it might be, instead of using plastics at all, they might use cardboards, or if they have to use plastics, thinking about like, okay, well, what other types of plastics are there that we can use that are biodegradable? There's now many types of plant-based polymers. There's one that we use on the 3D printers called PLA, which is polylactic acid, and that's made from cornstarch base. There's another one called potato pack, which is based on potato starch. And okay, sure, these plastics are not mechanically strong. It's nowhere near as strong. You couldn't make, say, a safety helmet from this material. It's far too brittle. But for low functional applications like packaging, they are fine. Like they're more than fine. And some companies, they've even developed like a 100% biodegradable plastic. So if you use it in packaging and it ends up in the ocean, it will eventually like just dissolve. I mean, for the 3D printers, we've actually got another filament, which is PVA, which is, I mean, you might know PVA glue, which is just that white water-based glue that you guys use in primary school and stuff, and that's completely non-toxic. It's just like water-based. It's very easy to wash. Now, we do have PVA filaments, so you can actually print stuff out of PVA. So essentially, you could make some very, very low-functioning applications of products out of PVA. Then if you leave it in water long enough, eventually it will just dissolve into nothing. So that's a way, and very quickly it will dissolve. So that's quite a clever way of working with plastics.